Alright folks, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving headfirst into a topic that might sound a little out there, maybe even a bit rebellious, but trust me, it's one of the most liberating concepts you'll ever stumble upon in your personal growth journey. We're talking about a book that's shaken up the traditional self-help scene, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Not giving a fuck? What, are we supposed to just check out, give up on our dreams and stop being positive? Hold your horses. Manson's actually inviting us to flip that whole script upside down. It's not about apathy, indifference, or throwing in the towel. Nope, not at all. The subtle art of not giving a fuck is something much deeper and, dare I say, spiritual. It's about discernment, about wisely choosing what's worth our precious energy, our limited time, our focused attention. Think about it. How many times have you felt overwhelmed, stressed out, or just plain drained because you were sweating the small stuff, worrying about things that, in the grand scheme, didn't actually impact your happiness or well-being? How many times have you bent over backwards to please others, to hit external benchmarks, to chase some idea of perfection that wasn't even yours to begin with? Manson tells us that life is just an endless parade of problems, and that happiness isn't about avoiding those problems, but about being able to choose which problems we want to have, and then tackling them head-on. That's a powerful outlook, right? Because it frees us from that crazy rat race towards a fake happiness where everything has to be perfect, and it brings us back to reality. It helps us see that real growth doesn't happen in some blissful bubble. It happens right there in the friction, the difficulty, the grit of overcoming obstacles. And this isn't a cynical message, believe me. It's a message of profound acceptance and authenticity. It means recognizing that we can't and shouldn't carry the weight of everything. It means learning to say no, to set boundaries, to protect our mental and spiritual energy. It means understanding that true power isn't about controlling every single aspect of our lives, but about controlling our reaction to events, deciding what deserves our attention and what, frankly, can just be left alone. For a guy or gal in their 40s or 50s who's lived enough to understand the disappointments and false promises of certain happiness rhetoric, this book can be a real eye-opener. It might just be the permission slip you needed to stop over-striving, to let go of those unrealistic expectations that have been draining you dry. It's an invitation to zero in on what's truly meaningful, on the values that resonate with your soul, rather than what society or others tell you should want. The book isn't pushing us to become indifferent, but rather to become highly selective, to care deeply about a few important things, and to not give a single fuck about all the rest. That's the core of it. It's an act of liberation, a realization that our energy isn't limitless, and we've got to use it wisely. Just imagine how many worries would just melt away if we simply decided they weren't worth our attention. How much freedom could we gain if we stopped seeking approval for every move we make? This is just the start of our journey through the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Get ready to challenge a lot of what you believe, to maybe laugh a little at yourselves, and hopefully, to find a new sense of peace and direction. It's not about being perfect, it's about being authentic. It's not about being happy all the time, it's about being resilient and finding meaning even in the tough spots. It's a powerful message, especially in an age where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us who we should be, what we should have, how we should feel. Manson offers us an exit ramp from that trap, a path that leads us toward greater authenticity and a more lasting, meaningful happiness. It's the beginning of an honest conversation about what it means to live a life that truly counts, not according to someone else's playbook, but according to our own inner compass. Ready to dig into this subtle art? I think you are. We've had this message drilled into us. Be happy. Chase happiness. Happiness is the key to everything. Every self-help book, every guru, seems to push us toward this constant pursuit of perpetual bliss. But Mark Manson, with his kind of gritty wisdom, drops an uncomfortable truth on us. Don't try to be happy. And no, he's not telling you to be a grump or a pessimist. He's inviting you to get real. Manson argues that the never-ending chase for happiness is, ironically, the very source of our unhappiness. Think about it. If your main goal is to be always happy, then every time you feel a negative emotion, anger, frustration, sadness, anxiety, you feel like a failure. You feel like you're doing something wrong, like you're not living up to your duty to be happy. And that, my friends, is a vicious cycle. When we fixate on happiness as some finish line to cross at all costs, we turn our emotions into a kind of moral judgment. I'm sad, so something's wrong with me. I'm angry, so I'm not a spiritual person. But emotions, both good and bad, are just part of the human experience. They're signals, indicators, not judgments. Sadness points to a loss, anger to a boundary crossed, fear to a potential danger. Denying these emotions, or trying to suppress them in the name of some forced happiness, means denying a fundamental part of ourselves and our journey. Manson suggests that happiness isn't a destination, but rather a byproduct of a life lived meaningfully, with clear values, and with a willingness to tackle problems. This idea can hit home pretty hard. How many times have you seen people chasing fleeting happiness, built on material possessions, status, or appearances, only to end up feeling empty? How many times have you felt guilty for not being happy enough, even when you had everything you thought you wanted? Manson pushes us to flip the script. Instead of asking ourselves, how can I be happy? We should be asking, what problems do I want to solve? Because life, at its core, is a series of problems. From finding a parking spot, to managing a tough relationship, to overcoming a professional challenge. True happiness doesn't emerge from the absence of these problems, but from the satisfaction we get from solving them, from overcoming them, from growing through them. Accepting that happiness isn't a constant state, but rather a flow between different emotions, and that even pain and difficulty have their purpose, is an act of deep spiritual maturity. It's an acknowledgement that life is complex, multi-layered, and that not everything has to be positive to be meaningful. In fact, it's often the tough experiences that mold us, teach us the most valuable lessons, and reveal our true inner strength. This isn't about wallowing in negativity, but about accepting it when it shows up, listening to its message, and learning from it. So, stop chasing happiness like it's some elusive butterfly. Start focusing on your values, on the things that truly matter to you, and on how you can face the challenges that will inevitably pop up on your path. When you do that, when you stop desperately searching for happiness, you'll discover that it often shows up unexpectedly, like a pleasant surprise, right when you're busy living an authentic and meaningful life. It's a paradox, I know, but it's a paradox that works. It's the freedom to be human, with all our imperfections, our joys, and our unavoidable difficulties. And in that freedom, there's a peace that no obsessive pursuit of happiness can ever give you. Let's pick up where we left off, because it's crucial to clear up a point that often gets misunderstood. When Mark Manson talks about not giving a fuck, he's absolutely not suggesting you become indifferent, apathetic, or cynical. It's not an invitation to sit on the couch and let the world go to hell while you just mind your own business. On the contrary, the truth about the art of not giving a is much deeper and, I'd say, spiritual. It's about radical discernment. Manson tells us that we simply can't give a fuck about everything. Our energy, our attention, our time, are finite resources. And if we try to worry about every little thing, every opinion, every problem, we'll end up overwhelmed, exhausted, and, ironically, less effective in the very things that truly matter. Think of it like a filter. Every day, we're bombarded with information, expectations, demands. If we don't have a filter, if we let ourselves be swayed by every external stimulus, we'll lose sight of what's essential. The art of not giving a fuck is precisely that filter. It's the ability to say, this isn't for me, this doesn't align with my values, this isn't my battle, I'm not going to worry about this. It's not indifference, it's intentional selectivity. It's a conscious choice to invest your emotional and mental energy only in what truly resonates with your core values and your life's purpose. For an adult, in their mid-40s or 50s, this concept carries significant weight. You've already accumulated years of experience, of wins and losses. You've learned, often the hard way, that you can't please everyone, that you can't control everything, and that sometimes you simply have to let go. How many of you have worried about the opinions of people who didn't matter, about problems that weren't yours, about goals imposed by others? Manson invites us to take an honest look at ourselves and ask, what am I worrying about that isn't adding value to my life, or is even taking it away? It's an uncomfortable question, but a necessary one. True freedom, according to Manson, isn't about having no problems, but about having problems that are worth dealing with. When you worry about something that's aligned with your values, that worry becomes meaningful. It becomes motivation, commitment, resilience. But when you worry about trivial things, about other people's drama that doesn't belong to you, about minor imperfections no one will even notice, then that worry is just a burden. It's wasted energy. The subtle art is recognizing that difference. It's saying, yes, I care about my family's well-being, my personal growth, my contribution to the world, but I don't care what my neighbor thinks about my car, or about strangers' judgments on social media, or about the minor inconvenience I can't control. This is a message of empowerment. It means taking the reins of your own life and deciding what to prioritize. It's an act of self-discipline and self-awareness. It's not easy, because we're conditioned to worry about a lot of things. But when you start practicing this subtle art, you'll discover an unexpected lightness. You'll free up mental and emotional space for the things that truly matter. You'll become more authentic, because you're no longer living to please others or to chase external ideals. You're living for yourself, in harmony with your own values. So it's not indifference, it's strategic indifference. It's a conscious choice of where to invest your energy. And when you do that, when you stop wasting energy on what doesn't matter, you'll find you have a lot more energy for the things you really care about, for the people who really deserve your attention, for the goals that truly inspire you. That's the real truth about not giving a fuck. It's the art of caring deeply, but only about the right things. And it's one of the most powerful lessons you can learn to live a full and meaningful life. Here's another point Mark Manson hits us with, plain and simple, that might be a tough pill for some folks to swallow. But it's a truth that, once you embrace it, can lead to some serious liberation. The chapter, "You Are Not Special," busts open one of the most widespread and, frankly, damaging narratives of our modern culture. This idea that every single one of us is destined to be extraordinary, one of a kind, special. From the time we're kids, we're told we can be anything we want, that the sky's the limit, that we're unique snowflakes. And in some ways, sure, that's true. We all have our own quirks. But Manson isn't talking about that. He's talking about the expectation that our life's journey has to be an exceptional blockbuster, that we have to leave an indelible mark, that our destiny is some earth-shattering, unheard-of success. This belief, which sounds motivating on the surface, can actually be incredibly paralyzing. If we believe we have to be special at all costs, then every time reality doesn't match that expectation, we feel inadequate, like a failure, like we're not living up to the hype. Life, for most of us, is made up of everyday stuff, of ups and downs, of ordinary challenges and small victories. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's a lot of beauty and dignity in living a regular life that's still profoundly meaningful. But if we're stuck in this idea that we constantly have to be above average, then every setback, every struggle, every moment of normalcy becomes a source of anxiety and shame. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who's perhaps already experienced the fleeting nature of certain successes or the frustration of unmet expectations, this message can be a huge sigh of relief. How many of you have chased an idea of career, wealth, or status, only to find it didn't bring the promised happiness? How many of you have felt in constant competition with others, measuring your worth against external comparisons? Manson invites us to free ourselves from this tyranny of having to be special. He reminds us that most of the things that truly matter in life, love, friendship, family, personal growth, contributing to your community, don't require you to be a genius or a celebrity. They require commitment, authenticity, vulnerability, and the willingness to face challenges. Accepting that you're not special in that grand, spectacular sense doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means embracing humility, recognizing your limits, and finding meaning in your own everyday uniqueness. It means understanding that true value isn't about standing out from everyone else, but about living a life that's true to you, with your own values and your own choices. It's a message of peace because it frees us from the pressure of constantly being in the spotlight, of having to prove something to someone. It allows us to focus on doing well rather than being the best. In a world obsessed with fame and flashy success, this chapter is a breath of fresh air. It brings us back down to earth, reminding us that most growth and fulfillment happen in the quiet moments, in daily perseverance, in the small actions that add up over time. It's not grandeur that defines us, but integrity, resilience, the ability to love and connect with others. We don't have to be special to be worthy of love or happiness. We're already worthy, simply by being human, with all our imperfections and all our potential. So let go of the burden of having to be extraordinary. Embrace your ordinariness with pride. Focus on building a life that's rich with meaning for you, on the relationships that nourish you, on the challenges that help you grow. You'll find that in this acceptance, there's a much deeper and more authentic form of specialness than any fleeting fame or wealth could ever offer. It's the specialness of simply being yourself, fully and without apology. And that, my friends, is one of the greatest liberations you can ever experience. Here's where Mark Manson slaps us with another uncomfortable truth, one that flies in the face of everything we've been taught. Happiness isn't the absence of problems. In fact, happiness is a problem in itself. And no, he's not just complaining. It's a deeply philosophical concept that, once you grasp it, can radically transform your whole approach to life and personal growth. Manson argues that life is, by its very nature, an endless series of problems. From the moment we're born until our last breath, we're constantly facing challenges to overcome, decisions to make, obstacles to navigate. From the most mundane, what's for dinner, to the most complex, how to handle a family crisis. Happiness, in this perspective, isn't some nirvana where problems magically vanish. It's actually the satisfaction we get from solving a problem. But here's the kicker. Once one problem is solved, another one immediately pops up. It's a never-ending chain. Think about it. When you reached a big goal, maybe that promotion you wanted or buying a house, you felt euphoric. That was happiness. But how long did it last? Soon enough, new problems surfaced. New work responsibilities, house maintenance, the need to furnish the place, and on it goes. This isn't pessimism. It's realism. If happiness were the absence of problems, we'd be condemned to perpetual unhappiness, because problems never stop coming. But if happiness is the ability to face and solve the problems that come our way, then life becomes a constant source of opportunities to experience happiness, even if it's fleeting. It's a continuous cycle: problem right pointing arrow, solution right pointing arrow, happiness right pointing arrow, new problem. And the quality of our lives, our overall happiness, doesn't depend on having zero problems, but on the kind of problems we choose to have and our ability to deal with them. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s who's been through various life stages, this concept can deeply resonate. You've seen that every achievement brings new challenges. Marriage brings relationship problems. Kids bring parenting problems. Professional success brings stress and responsibility problems. And that's normal, that's just life. The mistake is believing that once you reach a certain status or condition, the problems will disappear and you'll live happily ever after. That fairy tale makes us fragile and sets us up for disappointment. Manson pushes us to change our relationship with problems. Instead of seeing them as obstacles to avoid at all costs, we should see them as the building blocks of our growth. It's not about running away from suffering, but about choosing to suffer for things that matter. If you suffer from the difficulty of learning a new skill you love, that suffering is meaningful. If you suffer through the pain of a loss, that suffering is part of the healing process. But if you suffer over trivial things, self-inflicted drama, or useless worries, then that suffering is pointless. So the message is clear. Don't be afraid of problems. Don't try to eliminate them from your life, because it's impossible. Instead, start asking yourself, what problems do I want to have? Do you want problems related to a career you're passionate about, or problems related to a job you hate? Do you want problems related to a healthy, committed relationship, or problems related to loneliness and lack of connection? Your happiness, your fulfillment, depends on the quality of the problems you're willing to tackle. Accepting that happiness is a problem is an act of maturity. It's an acknowledgement that life is a continuous journey of growth, made up of challenges and solutions. It's the freedom to stop chasing an illusion and to start engaging with what's real and meaningful. When you understand this, you'll feel better equipped to face difficulties, less frustrated when things don't go as planned, and more capable of finding joy and satisfaction even in the daily struggles. It's a paradox, yes, but it's the paradox that opens the door to a more authentic and, ironically, happier life. All right, here we are at another fundamental pillar of Mark Manson's philosophy. The idea that not only do we need to accept problems as an integral part of life, but we also have the power to choose our struggles. This concept is incredibly liberating because it pulls us out of the position of being passive victims of circumstance and puts us squarely in the driver's seat of our own experience. Manson reminds us that life is packed with pain, challenges, and discomfort. We can't dodge them, but we can, and we must, choose what we're willing to suffer for, because ultimately, the difficulties we're willing to face and the problems we're willing to solve are a direct reflection of our deepest values. Think about it carefully. If your highest value is financial security, you'll be willing to put up with the stress of a demanding job, maybe with long hours and little free time. That's the struggle you've chosen in exchange for that value. If your value is love and connection, you'll be willing to navigate the complexities and compromises of a deep relationship with all its unavoidable arguments and misunderstandings. That's the difficulty you accept for that value. Conversely, if you're constantly complaining about difficulties you don't want, it's a sign that you're either not living in alignment with your true values, or you're trying to avoid the necessary suffering to achieve what you truly desire. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, this is a valuable lesson, often learned the hard way. How many of you have found yourselves in situations that don't satisfy you, complaining about the problems but not being willing to make the necessary sacrifices to change? Maybe you're in a job you hate, but you're not willing to take the risky step of looking for another one. Or you're in a relationship that isn't working, but you fear loneliness or the pain of separation. Manson pushes us to be honest with ourselves. Are we willing to endure the difficulties associated with our goals? If the answer is no, then maybe it's not the right goal for us. Or maybe our values are misplaced. Choosing your struggles means taking full responsibility for your life. It means recognizing that every choice has a price, and that happiness isn't a cost-free destination. It's a continuous process of evaluation. Am I willing to face this difficulty to achieve this result? Is this pain worth it for this value? When you align your struggles with your values, the suffering doesn't disappear, but it gains meaning. It becomes part of the journey, not an insurmountable obstacle. It even becomes a source of strength and resilience. This isn't an invitation to seek suffering for its own sake, but rather to understand that it's inevitable, and that we can influence the nature of that suffering. We can choose our battles. We can choose where to invest our energy and our resilience. If we choose to suffer for things we don't care about, our lives will be filled with resentment and frustration. But if we choose to suffer for things we're passionate about, for values we hold dear, then that suffering becomes a catalyst for growth, for fulfillment, for an authentic life. So take stock of your life. What difficulties are you facing right now? Are they difficulties you've consciously chosen because they're aligned with your deepest values and goals? Or are they difficulties that just happened to you because you avoided making uncomfortable choices in the past? Freedom isn't about being free from all problems, but about being free to choose the problems we want to face. When you do that, when you accept the price of your aspirations and your values, you'll discover an inner strength you didn't know you had. And in that strength lies the key to a life that's not perfect, but deeply meaningful and authentic. It's the wisdom of accepting suffering as part of the journey, but wisely choosing your route. You are not your emotions. This chapter by Mark Manson is a real game changer for anyone wanting to better understand and manage their emotional life. It pushes us toward an awareness that, for many, is revolutionary. You are not your emotions. This doesn't mean emotions aren't important, quite the opposite. It means our identity, our deepest self, isn't defined by the ups and downs of our moods. It's a crucial concept that frees us from the tyranny of our immediate reactions and gives us the power to choose how to respond instead of just reacting automatically. Think about it. How many times have you felt overwhelmed by anger, fear, or sadness and then acted impulsively, saying or doing things you later regretted? In those moments, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm an angry person, I'm an anxious person, I'm a sad person. But Manson tells us that's a false identification. Emotions are like clouds passing through the sky of your consciousness. They appear, they hang around for a bit, and then they float away. They aren't the sky itself. You are the sky, vast and unchanging, while emotions are just temporary phenomena within it. This distinction is fundamental for personal growth and for your inner peace. If we believe we are our emotions, we become slaves to every feeling. Sadness paralyzes us, anger blinds us, fear prevents us from acting. But if we recognize that emotions are just information, internal signals telling us something about our environment or our needs, then we can observe them, listen to them, but without letting them define or control us. We can ask ourselves, what is this anger telling me? Where is this sadness coming from? What does this fear mean? And then choose a conscious response, instead of reacting on impulse. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s who's lived enough to accumulate a lifetime of emotional experiences, this chapter offers an incredibly powerful perspective. You've learned that emotions can be overwhelming, but also that they pass. You've seen how impulsive reactions can lead to regret. Now's the time to apply that wisdom. Manson invites us to create a detachment from our emotions, not to suppress them, but to observe them with a certain curiosity and objectivity. It's a bit like a researcher studying a phenomenon. They observe it without judgment, trying to understand its causes and effects. This awareness gives us enormous power of choice. If you feel anger, you don't have to yell. If you feel fear, you don't have to run away. You can acknowledge the emotion, allow it to be there, and then choose how to act based on your values. Maybe the anger tells you a boundary has been crossed, and you can choose to communicate that assertively instead of exploding. Fear might signal a growth opportunity outside your comfort zone, and you can choose to face it with courage instead of backing down. Manson's message is that our identity isn't a fixed given dictated by our emotional reactions, but something we actively build through our choices and actions. It's not what we feel that defines us, but what we do despite what we feel. This is true emotional freedom. It's the ability to navigate inner storms without shipwrecking, to listen to the whispers and roars of our emotions without being swept away. It's the profound wisdom of knowing that, beyond every emotional turbulence, there's a center of calm, a solid identity that is our true essence. You are not your emotions. You are much, much more. And recognizing that is the first step toward a more emotionally aware and authentic life. Often, failure is seen as the end of everything, an indelible stain on our reputation, a glaring sign of incompetence. But Manson invites us to see failure as the way forward, not an obstacle, but essential feedback and an unavoidable component of success and growth. If you're not failing, Manson tells us, you're not trying hard enough, you're not taking enough risks, you're not learning enough. Think about it. As kids, we learn to walk by falling, yet we don't stop trying. We learn to talk by babbling and making mistakes. But at some point in our lives, often in adolescence or adulthood, we start to develop a paralyzing fear of failure. This fear stops us from trying new things, from stepping out of our comfort zone, from pursuing our biggest dreams. We'd rather stay in the illusory safety of doing nothing than risk not succeeding. But growth, real growth, only happens outside that comfort zone. And outside that zone, failure is guaranteed. Manson pushes us to change our relationship with failure. Instead of seeing it as a defeat, we should see it as a learning opportunity. Every failure contains valuable information: what didn't work, what we can improve, what we've learned about ourselves and the world. It's direct, honest feedback that guides us toward future success. It's like a scientific experiment. If an experiment doesn't work, it doesn't mean it's a total failure. It means you've ruled out one possibility and learned something new. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who's perhaps already experienced some significant failures in their life, this message can be incredibly liberating. How many of you have kicked yourselves for past mistakes, letting those failures define who you are? Manson invites us to change that narrative. Failure isn't a sign that you're wrong, but a sign that you're alive, that you're trying, that you're pushing past your limits. It's a sign of courage, not weakness. The difference between a successful person and someone who isn't often isn't about never failing, but about how many times they get back up after a failure. Resilience, the ability to learn from your mistakes and keep moving forward, is one of the most important qualities for personal and professional growth. And resilience is built precisely through failure. It's in those moments when things go wrong that we discover our true inner strength, our determination, our adaptability. So don't be afraid to fail. In fact, embrace failure. Like a friend, like a mentor, like your most honest guide. If you're not failing enough, you're probably not living your life to its fullest potential. You're not taking risks. You're not exploring your limits. Start seeing every setback not as a dead end, but as a launching pad. Celebrate the lessons learned, even the painful ones. Be grateful for the feedback you receive. Failure is the fertile ground where success grows. It's the process through which we refine our skills, strengthen our character, and get closer and closer to what we want. There's no success without a string of almosts and mistakes. So stop worrying about not succeeding. Start worrying about not trying at all. Give yourself permission to fail, learn from it, and then get back up, wiser and stronger than before. That's the real way forward. After talking about embracing failure, Mark Manson introduces us to a concept that's the absolute backbone of action and progress: the do something principle. It sounds almost too simple, right? But actually, it's an incredibly powerful idea, especially for anyone stuck in procrastination, overthinking, or the fear of not being ready enough. Manson tells us we don't have to wait for motivation to act. And we don't have to wait for perfect clarity or perfection before we start. We just have to do something. Often, we fall into the trap of thinking that motivation has to come before action. I'll feel motivated, and then I'll start doing X. But the reality is often the opposite. Action generates motivation. When you take even just one small step, you create momentum that can push you to take the next step, and then the next one after that. It's a virtuous cycle. Action dollar right arrow dollar, inspiration dollar right arrow dollar, motivation. Not the other way around. How many times have you felt stuck on a project, on a goal, simply because you were waiting for the right time or the right inspiration? And how many times did that moment never come? For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who has accumulated experiences and perhaps a few regrets over missed opportunities, this principle can be a real game changer. Maybe you have dreams tucked away, projects never started, changes you know you need to make but keep putting off. The most common excuse is, I don't feel ready, I don't have all the information, I don't have enough motivation. Manson tells us to stop with those excuses. Imperfection is the key to action. Do something doesn't mean blindly diving into crazy ventures. It simply means breaking inertia. If you want to write a book, write the first sentence. If you want to start exercising, take a 10-minute walk. If you want to change jobs, update your resume for half an hour. It doesn't matter how small the step is. The important thing is that it's a step forward. This small act creates momentum, a sense of accomplishment, and very often, it will give you the clarity or motivation you were waiting for. That's the beauty of this principle. It doesn't demand perfection, it doesn't demand genius, it doesn't demand a foolproof plan. It just demands the willingness to act, even with uncertainty. It's a lesson in humility and pragmatism. recognizing that life is a process of trial and error, and that the only way to figure out what works is to try. If we wait to have all the answers, we'll never start. Wisdom doesn't lie in knowing everything beforehand, but in the courage to act despite uncertainties. Furthermore, action gives us feedback. When we do something, we get information we wouldn't have had otherwise. We learn what works and what doesn't. We learn what we like and what we don't like. This feedback allows us to refine our direction, to adjust our aim, to proceed with greater awareness. It's an iterative cycle. Act $right arrow $. Learn $right arrow $. Adapt $right arrow $. Act again. And in this cycle, true growth is found. So don't wait for conditions to be perfect. Don't wait for motivation to fall from the sky. Don't wait to feel ready. Start from where you are, with what you have, and take a small, imperfect, but meaningful step. The fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of making mistakes, are all illusions that vanish in the face of action. The biggest hurdle is often getting started, and when you start, even imperfectly, you'll find that the road will reveal itself step by step. That's the transformative power of the do something principle. Just do it. Rejection makes you better. From birth, we're conditioned to seek approval, acceptance, inclusion. And for good reason. Our species' survival depended, and in part still depends, on our ability to be part of a group. But Manson invites us to look at rejection from a completely different perspective. Rejection makes you better. It's not something to avoid, but something to learn from, and, surprisingly, something that can make you stronger and more authentic. The fear of rejection leads us to live a life of compromise, to not fully express our truth, to hide our most original ideas so as not to upset others, or for fear of not being accepted. It pushes us to wear masks, to conform, to constantly seek external validation. But a life lived to please others is a life that isn't fully our own. It's a life that drains us, makes us dissatisfied, and ultimately unhappy. Manson pushes us to understand that rejection is a natural and inevitable process in life. Not everyone will like you. Not all your ideas will be accepted. Not everyone will want you around. And that's perfectly normal. In fact, if you've never been rejected, it's likely you're not taking enough risks. You're not fully expressing your authenticity. You're not pursuing what you truly desire. Because every time we express a preference, an opinion, a desire, we are implicitly excluding other options and other people. And that can lead to rejection. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s who has already faced disappointments and closed doors, this message can be a powerful call to strength. Perhaps you've experienced rejection at work, in love, or in friendships, and maybe at that moment the pain was agonizing. But Manson invites us to see the constructive side. Every rejection gives us valuable feedback. It tells us where we weren't aligned, where our expectations were different from others, or simply that we weren't the right fit for that situation or person. And this isn't a defeat. It's clarity. Rejection helps us better define who we are, what we want, and who we want to spend our time with. It pushes us to seek out situations and people who are more aligned with our values and our authenticity. If someone rejects you for who you are, that's valuable information that frees you from the need to waste energy trying to change or please them. It gives you permission to move on, to seek more genuine and meaningful connections. Rejection, in this sense, is a filter. It helps you weed out what's not right for you, to make space for what is. It makes you more resilient because you learn that you can survive the pain of rejection and come out stronger. It makes you more authentic because you stop trying to be someone you're not just to be accepted. It makes you wiser because you learn to discern between constructive criticism and the opinions of those who don't matter. So stop fearing rejection. Start seeing it as an opportunity for growth and clarification. Be willing to be rejected because it's a sign that you're living courageously, that you're expressing your truth, that you're pursuing what you truly desire. And in that willingness to be rejected, you'll find a freedom and authenticity that no constant search for approval can ever give you. It's the strength of knowing that your worth doesn't depend on external acceptance, but on your inner integrity. And that, my friends, truly, deeply makes you better. The death we must look at. This is perhaps the most profound and, for some, the most uncomfortable chapter in Mark Manson's book, but it also holds an ancient wisdom, the importance of facing our own mortality. Manson isn't inviting us to fall into pessimism or dread, but to look at death not as the end, but as the lens through which we give meaning to our lives. He reminds us that our existence is finite, and that this finite nature is precisely what makes every moment, every choice, every relationship so precious. We live in a society that tends to deny death, to hide it, to avoid talking about it. We distract ourselves with entertainment, with the constant pursuit of pleasure, with the accumulation of possessions, as if this could help us escape the inevitable. But this denial makes us fragile and prevents us from living fully. If we don't acknowledge our mortality, we tend to procrastinate, to put off our dreams, to take the time we have for granted. We act as if we have an infinite number of tomorrows, and so we waste today. Manson pushes us toward a deep awareness. One day, it will all end. And that's an uncomfortable truth, but also an incredibly powerful one, because it is precisely the awareness of the end that pushes us to value the present. It makes us ask, if I only had a certain number of years, months, days, what would I do? Who would I spend them with? What would I try to achieve? What would I truly care about? Death, in this perspective, becomes motivation, a catalyst for action, and for living an authentic life. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who may have already seen friends and relatives face illness or loss, this message can resonate with particular force. At this age, mortality is no longer an abstract concept, but a reality that begins to touch us personally. This is not a reason to despair, but to reflect. What are you putting off? What important conversations haven't you had? What dreams have you shelved? The awareness of the end gives us the courage to act, to stop procrastinating, to prioritize what truly matters. The idea isn't to live in constant fear of death, but to use it as a constant reminder of the preciousness of life, like a guiding light. If we know time is limited, we're more inclined not to waste energy on trivial things, on useless drama, on worries that lead nowhere. We're more inclined to focus on our values, on our most significant relationships, on our contribution to the world. Manson encourages us to consider our legacy, not in terms of fame or wealth, but in terms of how we lived and how we impacted the lives of those around us. What will people remember about you? What values will you have embodied? What kind of person will you have been? These questions, viewed through the lens of mortality, push us to live with greater integrity, greater intention, and greater love. So, don't shy away from the conversation about death. Accept it as an intrinsic part of life. Use it as a tool to sharpen your priorities. Let the awareness of your finite nature inspire you to live with greater courage, greater authenticity, and greater gratitude. because it is precisely in confronting our mortality that we find the most powerful impetus to live a life that is not just long, but profoundly meaningful. That's where we find the true art of living. Define your values. Define your values. Oftentimes, we live our lives based on values that aren't really ours, but rather have been shoved onto us by society, family, or the media. We chase material success, social approval, some perfect ideal, without ever stopping to ask ourselves, is this what I truly want? Is this what makes me happy and fulfilled? Manson pushes us to do some deep soul-searching to pinpoint our real values. What are values in this context? They're not superficial desires or specific goals. Instead, they're the guiding principles that shape our decisions, our actions, and our behavior. They're what we consider intrinsically important, what drives us to be the person we want to be. Manson points out that there are good values and bad values. Bad values are those that depend on external factors, like wealth, popularity, status, or that are unrealistic and uncontrollable, like being happy all the time, never having problems. These values make us fragile and constantly set us up for disappointment. Good values, on the other hand, are those that are within our control, realistic and constructive. For example, honesty, curiosity, vulnerability, resilience, compassion, creativity, commitment. These values allow us to live a more authentic life and find satisfaction even in difficulties, because our fulfillment depends on actions we can take regardless of external circumstances. If your value is honesty, you can be honest in any situation, even if the consequences are uncomfortable. If your value is curiosity, you can keep learning and growing, regardless of your successes or failures. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s who has already lived enough to experience the false promises of externally imposed values, this invitation to define your own values is crucial. How many of you have found yourselves midlife, wondering if the path you are on was truly yours? Maybe you've hit goals that society deems successful, but you feel empty. That's a sign that your values aren't aligned with your actions. Manson encourages us to try an exercise. Think about the times you felt most alive, most fulfilled, most yourself. What were you doing? What were your motivations? Or think about the times you felt most guilty, most frustrated, most dissatisfied. What happened? These contrasting moments can reveal a lot about your true values. It's a process of self-discovery that takes honesty and courage. It's not easy, because we often have to question deeply rooted beliefs. Once you've identified your true values, life becomes clearer, decisions become easier. Your energy focuses on the things that truly matter. You stop wasting time and energy on things that don't resonate with your soul. This doesn't mean life will be problem-free, but the problems you face will be the ones you've chosen, because they're aligned with what you genuinely care about. And facing problems that matter is the path to true happiness and fulfillment. So take the time to reflect. What's truly important to you? What are you willing to stand for? What makes you proud of yourself, regardless of what others think? Don't be afraid to redefine your values, even if it means veering off a path you always thought was yours. Because it's only when we live in alignment with our deepest values that we can experience a life that's authentic, meaningful, and, yes, profoundly happy. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. How to measure your success. In a world obsessed with external metrics, how much money you make, what kind of car you drive, how many followers you have on social media, the number of promotions you get, Mark Manson invites us to a radical shift in how you measure your success. His point is simple but profound. If you only measure your success by external factors you don't control, you're destined to be constantly dissatisfied and at the mercy of circumstances. True success, the lasting and meaningful kind, has to be measured by metrics that are within your control and aligned with your inner values. Think about the illusion of success that's constantly fed to us. We're told that if we reach a certain level of wealth, or a certain social standing, or a certain physical appearance, we'll finally be happy. But how many of you, or how many people you know, have reached those milestones only to find that happiness didn't show up, or was just fleeting? That's because those external metrics are a moving target. There's always someone with more money, a better job, a perfect body. And if your worth is based on constant comparison, you'll always be losing. Manson pushes us to redefine success in terms of process and values, rather than just final external results. Success, according to him, isn't a destination to be reached, but a series of actions and decisions aligned with what truly matters to us. For example, if your value is curiosity, success could be measured by the number of books you read, the new things you learn, the questions you ask yourself. If your value is honesty, success could be measured by your ability to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. These are metrics you can control, regardless of external circumstances. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who has already played the social comparison game and perhaps come out exhausted, this chapter offers a way out. How many of you have felt guilty for not reaching a certain level of success that society demands? Maybe you felt inadequate compared to your peers, or not living up to your parents' or partner's expectations. Manson gives you permission to let go of those external expectations and focus on what you can control: your effort, your integrity, your resilience, your growth. Imagine measuring your success not by your bank account, but by the quality of your relationships. Not by the size of your house, but by your capacity for forgiveness. Not by the number of accolades, but by how well your words and actions line up. These are metrics that empower you because they depend entirely on you. You don't need anyone's approval or good luck to achieve them. They just require your will and your commitment. This doesn't mean giving up ambition or self-improvement. It simply means that ambition and improvement should be driven by internal values, rather than by an endless chase for something that will never truly satisfy you. When you measure success this way, every day becomes an opportunity to succeed, because every day you can choose to act in alignment with your values. Every small action becomes a brick in the building of a meaningful life, not just a step towards some fleeting finish line. So, stop measuring your worth based on what others have, or what society tells you to desire. Start measuring your success based on your integrity, your personal growth, the depth of your relationships, your contribution to the world. Focus on the process, not just the outcome. You'll be surprised how much more rewarding and fulfilling this form of success will be. It's profound freedom, the freedom to define your own worth, and to live a life that is a success, on your own terms. Now that we've dug into Mark Manson's core principles, it's time to figure out how to actually apply this subtle art in your everyday life. This isn't just some abstract theory. It's a practical approach that can totally transform how you handle daily challenges and interactions. Putting this art into practice doesn't demand huge, sudden changes or radical overhauls. Instead, it's about constantly tweaking your mindset and your reactions. It's about becoming more aware of where you're pouring your energy and then redirecting it towards what truly matters. Think about all the little things that worry or annoy you every single day. The morning traffic, a long line at the grocery store, a sarcastic comment on social media, a work email that gets under your skin, a stranger's judgment. Manson invites us to sort through it all, to discriminate. Ask yourself, does this thing really deserve my worry? Does it have a significant impact on my values or my long-term life? Often, the answer will be no. And when it's no, the subtle art is simply not giving a f***. Let it go. Allow things to be as they are, without letting them consume you. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s, who's got a full plate of commitments and responsibilities, this is an exercise in energy management. Your time and mental energy are precious resources. If you spend them worrying about every little thing, you won't have any left for what truly matters: your family, your passions, your meaningful work, your health. The subtle art teaches you to protect these resources. Learn to say no to requests that aren't aligned with your values. Learn to tune out the background noise that adds nothing to your life. This also means being more selective in your relationships. How much energy do you spend trying to please people who don't genuinely appreciate you? How many times have you felt obligated to attend social events that didn't interest you, just to look good? The art of not giving a f*** gives you permission to choose your interactions, to invest in relationships that nourish you, and to distance yourself from those that drain you. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation and wisdom. Another aspect of daily application is embracing imperfection, both your own and others. Stop chasing perfection in yourself and in the world around you. Accept that things won't always go as planned, that you'll make mistakes, and that people won't always live up to your expectations. And when that happens, instead of sinking into frustration or self-blame, apply the subtle art. Don't give a f*** about it. Learn from the setback, forgive the imperfections, and move on. This daily practice leads to greater inner peace. You'll be less prone to stress, anxiety, resentment. You'll have more energy to focus on what brings you joy and meaning. You'll be more present in your interactions and more authentic in your expressions. You won't be perfect, and Manson doesn't care. But you'll be freer, more resilient, and more aligned with your true essence. So every time you feel overwhelmed by a worry, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, does this thing really deserve my worry? If the answer is no, let it go. If the answer is yes, because it's aligned with your values, then commit to it with all your energy, but without letting the worry consume you. That's the subtle art. It's a more conscious, more intentional, and ultimately, more fulfilling way to live. It's the freedom to choose where to invest your precious fuck. After digging into Mark Manson's deep, sometimes jarring but ultimately liberating principles, the final message is crystal clear. Put it into practice. Knowledge without action is just dead weight. Reading this book or watching this video and then not applying what you've learned would be like reading a swimming manual but never actually jumping in the water. Real transformation doesn't happen through intellectual understanding. It happens through trying things out and experiencing them. Manson isn't asking you to flip your life upside down overnight or to suddenly become some enlightened guru. He's asking you to start, even with baby steps, to weave the subtle art of not giving a f*** into your daily routine. That means you'll have to be willing to feel uncomfortable, to make mistakes, to doubt yourself. But that's exactly where the growth happens. Remember the do something principle? That's where it kicks in. Don't wait for perfection or full-blown motivation. Just start. For a man or woman in their 40s or 50s who's got established habits and ways of thinking, This might take a conscious effort, but it's an effort that's totally worth it. Start by pinpointing one area of your life where you're over-worrying about things that don't truly matter. Maybe it's a colleague's opinion, a minor household hiccup, or an anxiety about the future that you can't control. And every time you catch yourself worrying about that thing, consciously try not to give a FJCK. Let it go. Allow yourself to feel the initial discomfort, but don't let it consume you. This also means being honest with yourself about your values. Have you really defined what truly matters to you? If not, take the time to do it, and then start living more in line with those values. If honesty matters to you, be more honest, even when it's tough. If personal growth matters, dedicate time to learning, even when you're tired. Action, driven by your values, is the key. Practice isn't a straight line. There will be days when you feel overwhelmed again, when you fall back into old habits of useless worrying. And that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Manson reminds us that failure is part of the process. The important thing is to recognize when it happens, learn from it, and then pick yourself up and start again. Every time you try not to give a FCK about something that doesn't deserve your attention, you're strengthening a new neural pathway, a new mental habit. And over time, it will become easier and more natural. Consider this an experiment with yourself. Try for a week to identify 3 things each day that you worry about, but that don't truly matter. And for each of them, practice not giving a FCK. Notice what happens. How do you feel? What changes? You'll see that, slowly but surely, your perspective will start to shift. You'll feel lighter, freer, more in control of your reactions. The subtle art of not giving a FCK isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's a continuous practice of discernment, acceptance, and action. It's the willingness to embrace imperfection, failure, and difficulties as integral parts of a meaningful life. And the reward is greater authenticity, deeper inner peace, and the ability to live a life that is truly yours, defined by your values and not by anyone else's expectations. So don't put it off. Start today. Pick one thing, big or small, and put the subtle art into practice. I promise you, your life won't be the same. And, ironically, you'll worry a lot less and live a whole lot more. It's time to act. We've explored his counterintuitive ideas that challenge so much of what society has taught us about happiness and success. But what's the core message, the big takeaway Manson wants to leave in our minds and hearts? Here's the gist. True personal growth and lasting happiness aren't found in constantly chasing positivity or in desperately avoiding problems and difficulties. On the contrary, the key to a meaningful life lies in the ability to consciously and profoundly choose what deserves our worry, our energy, and our commitment, and to bravely accept the inevitability of problems and struggles as an essential part of our growth journey. Manson pushes us toward a radical form of personal responsibility. He invites us to stop giving a FCK about trivial stuff, about other people's opinions that don't matter, about drama that isn't ours, or about unrealistic expectations shoved onto us from the outside. Instead, we've got to learn to give a FCK only about the things that are truly aligned with our most authentic values. This means recognizing that we're not special in the flashy, show-off sense, but we are unique in our ability to choose the problems we're willing to tackle. It means accepting that happiness is a problem in itself, not its absence, and that failure isn't a roadblock, but the main path to learning and getting better. It means understanding that we're not our emotions, but we can choose how to respond to them, and that being aware of our mortality is a powerful kick in the pants to live with more intention and authenticity. In a nutshell, Manson gives us a roadmap for a more authentic and meaningful life, built on the intentional selectivity of our worries. It's an invitation to live with greater integrity, embracing our imperfections and life's inherent difficulties, and to focus our energy on the few things that genuinely matter. It's not about being cynical or apathetic. It's about being smart and strategic about where you invest your valuable fuck. It's the freedom to be human, with all our complexities, and to find meaning and joy in the process of overcoming the challenges we choose to face. This, my friends, is the heart of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FCK, the art of caring deeply, but only about the right things. And it's a message that, if you truly embrace it, has the power to transform your life from a frantic chase into a conscious and deeply meaningful journey.